All right, perfect. A very good morning, afternoon, evening to all of our attendees, wherever they're attending from across the globe. Thank you so much for taking time out for the session. I want to formally welcome everybody to the Impact Delivery Community Gathering, the live sort of Ask Me Anything session that we're doing here. This is the second session that we're running. We got a tremendous response on this, and we're really excited to get all your questions. I'm joined by Erin Quinn, who is our Senior Director of Customer Success. She is best suited to answer all these great questions that you've shared with us. She works closely with all of our partners and has a lot of knowledge of CommCare and how it is implemented across different use cases, across different sectors for a variety of different organizations. By way of quick introduction, my name is Rishabh Rath. I'm the Director of Partnerships for Dimagi. I'm based out of our offices in Delhi. I'll be facilitating this session. And in case there's a question that resonates with you, one of you have asked, just feel free to throw in comments into the chat if there's any other context that we should be aware of. And then, of course, all of this will get recorded, so it would be available to people to access later as well. We'll be happy to share all of those details too. All right, Erin, would you be happy to do a quick introduction for folks to know who you are, and then I can get started with the questions?
Of course. Thanks, Rishabh. And Rishabh, like he said, is normally based out of India, and he and I were coworkers together in India. But right now he's calling in from Boston. I'm in DC. So it's very lovely to see you in the same time zone for once, Rishabh. Although he did have a very
Likewise.
rude awakening to how early we start our day here. In India, you have to work well into the night, and here you have to get up pretty early in the morning. I think I prefer the Indian hours, if I'm being honest. My name is Erin Quinn. I've been at Dimagi almost 10 years. It'll be 10 years this December. I started off on our solution side, on our full service side, working out of our India office, working primarily on smaller implementation projects in rural India, a lot of public health projects, as well as some education and agriculture projects as well. I did that for about 5 years, and then I came over to our self-service or our SaaS division, and I've been running our customer success team ever since then. Our customer success team is the team that is charged with making sure that all of you, our users, are fully utilizing the product, getting all the value you can out of CommCare, and that we are making sure you have the resources to, like I said, just use the product as best you can. As a part of that, we work really closely with our enterprise customers. We also do onboardings and service packages for those of you who might want a little bit of extra training or a holding hand at the beginning of your projects, or as you heard, hit certain inflection points. So that's some of what my team does. And by virtue of that, I think we're also the ones on the SaaS division that have the privilege of working the most closely with our partners. And so that is why I get to do these Ask Me Anythings with you guys, because I have worked with a lot of implementing partners, and we get to see a lot of the challenges that you guys have, how you're able to overcome those challenges, some solutions that partners have had. And so, I mean, my answers today are really just stolen from my 10 years worth of experience working with all of you.
All right, great. Thanks so much, Erin. So with this, I think we can get started with the first question from Dan Sheridan from Sibel Health, Erin. And the question is, could you share any strategies for customer success and or methods for triaging? There are a couple of associated questions from Peter Polo, which is there any funding for training of trainees on the system? I would assume it means within the CommCare ecosystem. So I think that probably alludes to all the training resources we have, perhaps Academy and some of those other things. So yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Those are great questions. And in fact, last week, if you guys are keeping up with our LinkedIn page, we had a big enterprise summit with all of our enterprise partners in Washington, D.C. And one of the big topics that came up for our enterprise partners who are globally rolling out was this idea of, how do I, as a team of 1, 2, or 3 people at HQ, train a full, global rollouts worth of CommCare users? So what are effective ways that we can build capacity on the team that doesn't involve like a really high touch human element every single time? And I think, even we at Dimagi have that same sort of challenge that we're coming up against when we get new staff. It's not that every time that a new staff member comes on at Dimagi, like Erin is going to go take 2 weeks of her time and train them. So there's a few key resources that I think we've developed that we are hoping to even develop further. The first is the Dimagi Academy. So if you haven't checked it out, you can just Google the Dimagi Academy. We have several courses on there. We have CommCare Fundamentals, CommCare App Building, CommCare Calculations, and then we have a feature-specific course on repeat groups. These are a great place to start. I think they're a really good foundation for you. It will get you used to kind of the lexicon of CommCare, some of the terms, some of the broad sort of features that we have. It'll teach you about things like case management or display conditions, some of the core functionalities of the platform. And it's really good to start doing that before you start playing around in the product. I think it'll give you really nice background to then go create your CommCare project space and start playing around. Then once you go and you actually start trying to build out your application, another great resource for you is the CommCare help site. We internally also refer to this as the wiki. And I like to say that the wiki is smarter than any one Dimagi staff person, myself included, because it's really just the brain dump of all of us over all the years that we've existed. And so the wiki is really helpful for when you have very feature-specific questions. So, all right, I'm trying to create a checkbox lookup table type question, and I want to filter it by state or by county. How do I do that? The help site is going to be there to give you really specific instructions on how to use features like that. So that is a fantastic resource when you start actually trying to build out your app. There are other things on the help site as well, things like guides on how to choose the correct device, guides on how to do performance testing, application design, a bunch of other kind of implementation related things as well. But I would say like the core of the materials there are really on application building and system development. We also have our CommCare user forum, and that's a place where anyone can post questions. You guys as advanced users are always encouraged to answer other people's questions. Certainly we have some very active Dimagi developers who answer a lot of questions on there. But we encourage you to do that as well. And, once you are a user and you've got your project space set up, you also can reach out to the support team with any questions or bugs that you have as well. We encourage you to use all those other resources I just said first, and then as a last resort, go to the support team, mostly because you can almost always find the answer that you need on the help site. What I've seen a lot of our enterprise organizations do, who have gotten very good at training and rollout, is they kind of create a little bit of like a program for their internal staff. They'll say, take the Dimagi Academy courses first. Maybe they have some training materials that are a little bit more specific to the use cases of that organization. So they create a little bit of training on their own, and they kind of put folks through a program like that. So if you are faced with the challenge of, say, a training 10, 20, 30 people in your organization, it's definitely worth it for you to look at what all resources we have and then what you can supplement with, and think about kind of using like a blended learning approach, I would say, where you have people use the self-service tools, but then you also check in with them periodically. I know when I recruit onto my team, I'm normally recruiting folks that already know CommCare, but I'll put them through a series of exercises. I'll have them take the courses. I'll check in with them. I think online resources are great. Understand that there will always be additional questions. So if you just tell someone to learn only from the Academy and the wiki, that's going to be tough for them. They are going to want to talk one-on-one with you. When we train people at Dimagi, we also often have them build what we call a fun app as kind of their practice of how to use CommCare. And we call it a fun app because, honestly, it's just more fun, but it gets them to creatively think about ways that they could use CommCare. So I think one of mine and Rishabh's colleagues, at the time that she started, there were cats who came into the Delhi office from the yard of our office, And so she created a cat tracker where we could track when the cats were coming in, if we fed them, things like that. And what's fun about that is, like, obviously it's a very silly and kind of fun use case, but it also still gets you thinking creatively about case management and about the ways in which you can use our different features. So if you're training a bunch of people, I would definitely kind of, as the capstone or as the ultimate thing that your trainees have to do, I think building a fun app is great. You can choose how fun you want to let it be. Some people want it to be really sector specific and kind of work related, but I know we've had a lot of luck kind of making them fun. So that's what I would say in terms of like training overall. And all of those resources that I just listed, they're all free. They're online. You can access them at any point in time. If you are interested in becoming a CommCare provider, I believe that there is a sign up that we can grab the link for to express your interest in that. And Rowena, who runs that team, would be in touch with you. And you'll go through a lot of the resources that I just said, and then take there's some certification criteria. And after that, you would become a certified CommCare provider. So that's certainly something that you can do as well. And what was the triaging requests? That was another part of this question too. And I think that this is really interesting because, again, this is actually a topic that came up at our enterprise summit of what do you do if you're kind of the lone HQ administrator of a very large program, and how do you keep track of all the requests that come in? Email is what a lot of people use, and that's, I'm going to say, a tough way. A tough way if you're just, if the answer is email Erin, then you're going to get, or email whoever you are. That's going to be a tough way for you to process those requests. Some sort of intermediary thing could be submitting something like a Google form or MS Forms, depending on what software you guys have, where you would ask, if anyone wants to report an issue or wants to request support or something, they can at least submit it in some sort of form that gives you some standard details about it. So like their name, link to whatever resources they might be looking at, link to their application if it's an app issue, the question, why, like how urgent is it, things like that. You could at least track it that way. Also with things like MS Forms and Google Forms, you can easily get those exported into a spreadsheet. So like at least that's a little bit easier of a tracking system. Or for those of you who really have a lot of requests or are quite advanced in how you want to triage these, you can use a proper ticketing software. So something like ServiceNow or Jira. We internally use Jira. If you've ever submitted a ticket to our support team, I'm sure you've gotten a link from Jira. So that certainly is, I think, kind of the gold standard of how you would keep track of these tickets. It allows you to really concretely take tickets and tag them with different tags, set them through the stages, and then resolve them when they're done. If you're just one person, maybe a ticketing system is not quite right for you. So I think depending on the maturity of your project and how many requests you're getting, I think, that might determine which one of those strategies you could use. But it's definitely no small task to be the person who is come to with all those troubleshooting requests. And so it's definitely a good idea to look into, what can most sustainably be done from your end.
Great, thanks, Erin, for sharing all of those insights and listing out all of these resources. One thing I would definitely say is from the partnership side, all the organizations we work with who actually spend time doing those courses and regularly using the help site and the user forum find this experience on CommCare to be much easier, and they ease into sort of app building much better. So yeah, anybody who's using CommCare is highly encouraged to use all of these training resources. All right, thanks, Erin. Are we good to go to the next question? All right. So Bethlehem from Care asks, is there any way to verify the data quality, and is CommCare case sensitive? I think this is kind of a good transition from training resources into data consumption, data analysis. Yeah, go for it, Erin.
Sure. On case sensitivity in terms of your passwords and stuff, it definitely is. Within your application, that very much depends on how you design it. It can be if you want it to be. In terms of data quality and making sure that you're getting accurate and clean data out of the system, there are lots of different things that you can do to ensure that. What's the saying, like an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure or something? So what can you do on the prevention side? What are ways that you can actually build your application in ways that are going to, help make sure that clean data comes out? One way is by using validation conditions. Validation conditions, of course, validate the answer that a user inputs. So for example, if you have a question like asking the MUF, the middle upper arm circumference, this is normally something that is measured in centimeters, and a normal range would be anywhere from like at the very, 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 very smallest, like 8, and at the largest, I don't know, maybe like 30. I'm not sure. I'm not a public health expert, but something like that. Like if you think that the largest you could ever get would be 30 or 40 centimeters, don't let people put in things like 100. Actually, this MUAC example comes from a project I was working with. It is measured in centimeters, but what we had a lot of people putting in like 132, 115, and we're like, what is happening? And they were actually reporting in millimeters, not in centimeters. And so that's why they were putting in these values in the hundreds. And what it meant was that actually there were some malnourished children who we were not flagging, because if they had put it in centimeters, it would have been flagged as moderate malnutrition. But because we were putting it in millimeters, it was showing as like wildly overnourished. So validation conditions are great for making sure that you can confine what people are putting in. You can not only define the parameters around values like numbers, you can also do it around things like string length. So if you're putting in a national ID number and it should be 16 digits long, you can say you have to give me a 16-digit long string. Or similarly with phone numbers, we can say like you have to be able to, give me 10 digits and not more, not less. You can also say it has to be letters, it has to be numbers, it has to be in a certain format. You can put validation conditions in for all of those things. You can also use creative things like, display conditions to only show out the correct questions that should be showing to someone for that. You can additionally create things like help text and labels within to help guide your users. So for instance, in a MUAC question, you could put a piece of help text that says, remember, this needs to be in centimeters, not in millimeters. And you can flag things. You can kind of provide like summaries at the end of a form. You could say like, here's a summary of all the information you entered. Does this look correct? And it makes people look at it one more time. So the sky's really the limit on the sorts of things that you can do on the mobile to both restrict the answers that you're allowing and also just guiding users and saying, this is what you said. Does that all look accurate to you? That is really powerful. I would definitely recommend you do that. Then if you are, say, a data administrator, there's also ways that you can look at data and start to flag records that are looking odd. And one of the best ways you can do that is actually by using our feature called the Case List Explorer, which was recently released. What you can do in the Case List Explorer is you can pull down a case export of cases that meet whatever search parameters you want. So for instance, you could pull down records of all 5-year-olds who were severely malnourished in like the last year or something. And you can start to investigate those records one by one, or you can investigate them in bulk. If you're seeing, one of the things that you can do is you can kind of put in search criteria that you think shouldn't be allowed. So for example, if you were looking at like 3-year-olds and school attendance, like that probably shouldn't be a thing, right? So you can kind of start to put in parameters that you think it is actually flagging bad data, and then look at all the cases that come up, start to look at trends, see if you need to clean up any of them on the back end, see if you need to talk to your frontline workers, if they're collecting something that seems a little bit out of ranges of what you're thinking. It's just a way for you to kind of identify and dig into that. And of course, if at any point you recognize that there's data that needs to be edited, we have loads of tools for you to do that. You can clean a form data, clean case data on an individual level on CommCare HQ. You can also use tools like the Excel case importer to import and clean data. So there's lots of ways to identify and clean data once you've seen that there is something that's wrong. And again, I would always, when you find that data and you clean it, but always go back to the people that collected it to say what's going on. Make sure that it's not going to be a recurring issue, that you fix at the source whatever issue it was that was causing this unclean data to come into the system.
Great, thanks, Erin. So in case anyone's interested, we'd be happy to send over all of those links. There's all these cool tools that we have, Case List Explorer, the data cleaning options, and they all work really, really well. So Erin, now we are going to kind of move away from the hands-on sort of app building and data to a broader question, which Frank from App Associates asks. The question is, can you speak to digitalization of community engagement interventions for health promotion? And then Richa Singh asks, how do we improve adoption of digital tools for users in remote or rural areas of a state or country? I think this is right down your alley. I think this is literally what we've been kind of building for. So take it away.
Yeah, it's so right. I think my first 5 years was mostly doing community health interventions in India. So I think in terms of like speaking, I think specifically the question is around like behavior change communication and like community health interventions. And so I will say CommCare has been used a lot for these sorts of interventions. It depends, of course, a little bit around what the structure of your project looks like. So for example, in India, they have a really rich history of like community health workers, of ASHAs, Anganwadi workers, auxiliary nurse midwives. There's like really rich government infrastructure there to help facilitate linking you up to the formal health system. And also just making sure like those community health workers, those ASHAs are really the ones who are doing home visits, making sure people are getting to referrals when they need to, but also providing sort of that frontline care experience, especially for people who are pregnant or lactating, or for child growth and nutrition monitoring. So some of these interventions are going to be a little bit more like community health focused, particularly in countries, you know, like India, Kenya. A lot of countries that have really rich community health programs are going to lean in and use that community health infrastructure to promote these sorts of behavior change communication. And so if you're in a country like that, it might look like adding counseling messages or adding training modules to existing home visits. Sometimes we would do this with things like family planning. When we say adding in counseling messages, that can be anything. It could be prompting messages for the community health worker to actually start talking about that topic. It could mean adding multimedia, especially like videos or audio messages that they could put on their phone and actually display out to the user. And sometimes there are some, if you look in our evidence base, there's some evidence to say that occasionally it resonates more with people if you can kind of have like an expert on a video that you're able to show people. So that's a great way that you can kind of get those messages out there if you've got a community health program. Then there are some that are kind of like not necessarily linked to a community health program, but are really like their own initiative with their own sorts of things. And so what we'll see in interventions like that is like maybe you'll have events like advocacy meetings or training events or kind of more like public town hall sort of events. And then what we end up tracking in CommCare is a little bit more of those events. So we look at attendance. You might do baseline and endline surveys around like knowledges and practices and things like that, trying to get a sense of like pre and post intervention, like what were the community attitudes around this? And then also, you know, so those would be kind of like your baseline end line right here. And then in the middle, you're tracking all of your interventions. So what sort of activities and community events are you running? Who's attending? You know, what does their participation look like? Things like that. And I think all of those are things that we've seen CommCare being used for. And it really, the software, I think, can really accommodate whatever sort of project you envision. Like I said, whether you're tapping into the existing health infrastructure or whether you're doing something on top of what is already there. So that's for the first one. And then I think the second question that is looking a little bit more just in terms of like how you can support adoption of digital tools in users who are in remote or rural areas. Certainly, one of the most important things is having a tool that is offline first, which CommCare is, which basically means that your application is going to work just as well whether you're in an area where you have data connection or you don't. So having offline case management means that you can continue to go about your day, meeting with all the clients you need to work with, and never really have to worry about if you're in an area of connectivity. We certainly have projects where users will never naturally be in an area of connectivity. And so maybe once a week or once every 2 weeks, they will ask their frontline workers to, go to the city, go in, sync, get that data onto the server. But from the user's perspective, on a day-to-day basis, they shouldn't be seeing any effect of the fact that they are not in an area of data connection. So I think that's the most important when you're talking about adoption of tools. There is like making sure that the tool is going to work really seamlessly for you in those settings. And then beyond that, I think you just have to look at your user base, which is what we encourage anyone to do, but specifically in rural areas. I know like 10 years ago when I was starting doing projects in rural India with ASHAs and other community health workers, literacy was a really big issue. We would have really accomplished community health workers that just didn't really know how to read and write very well. And so we had to shorten, some of the questions. We would put audio and visuals in the app to help the user. So if you didn't know how to read or you weren't exactly sure what a question was asking, you could press an audio button and it would actually play for you. And that was really helpful in terms of just making that application usable for those users who struggled with literacy. Also, remember, local languages are super important, particularly in places where lots of languages are spoken. So maybe French is the dominant language or the one that's used for the government. But if you have speakers of local languages, add those in too. It's fairly easy to add in languages to CommCare. So I would definitely recommend that you put in any local languages, including tribal languages, or, I know in India, we would, maybe it would be in Bengali and English, and then we would add Maithili or, other local languages as well. Again, talk to your users before you add a language. There were a few times when I was working in Jharkhand and we're like, oh, they're definitely going to want Maithili. And they're like, nah, we don't need it. It's fine. Bengali works for all of us. So, talk to them so you're not doing unnecessary work. It's not add 10 languages and hope they work. Figure out what your users want. But, that's another way that you can really help folks, especially in rural and remote places. And then lastly, I would say, think about how much training they have. Think about what their digital literacy is. And again, you should be thinking of this no matter where you're operating, in a city, in a rural setting. But have these people used smartphones before? Back 10 years ago, a lot of times this was the first smartphone anyone was seeing. They might have had a Nokia family phone at home that was shared amongst the family members, but no one had a smartphone. And so no one had a touch screen. And so in those cases, we actually had to spend, I think, almost the entire first day of a 2 or 3 day training talking about the phone itself and saying this is your phone. This is the on off button. And this is what it means. This is what the little airplane icon means. This is what the little bars mean. And it's really important for people to know, when do I have low battery? Do I have data connection or not? Do I have screen rotation on or not? People really hate when their screen starts flipping when they move their phone. And so looking at digital literacy and just knowing that if you are working with a population that is not accustomed to using smartphones, you need to provide, totally separate from CommCare, just a lot of training on smartphones, how to take care of smartphones, how to use smartphones, how to type. Typing is very difficult, especially again, if you've got both digital literacy and reading literacy sort of issues. So I think, in general, again, there's a lot of things you can do on the software side, but then just really intimately knowing, if you're working in a rural place, what your user base looks like and what unique needs they might have, and just planning enough support to get them where they need to be in order to be comfortable and proficient with the phone is really one of the biggest things you can do, along with making sure your software is offline first.
Great, thanks, Erin. Yeah, a lot of what you just shared brings back so many memories of all of these training sessions we did in these settings, and it was incredible. I felt like it was rewarding actually to suddenly see this audience understand and get how that phone is supposed to work, and then transition into how that app within the phone is supposed to work. So many anecdotes. So the next theme that we're going to look at is around sustainability. And I think this is another big one that comes up quite often in all of our conversations across the board. So Terry Mathenge asks, how should we be thinking about our plan for program implementation with sustainability in mind from the very beginning? And then there are a couple of associated questions. Bengo and Mark ask similar questions. How do we achieve sustainability of global digital health interventions in the face of rapidly changing landscape and localization? I think the localization piece is a key one. And then Mark asks how to measure the sustainability of digitizing a program after it has been completed. So after how long can it be done and who can do this?
Yeah, those are great questions. And I think that those really play into what we've developed at Dimagi, from all of our experience. We talk about this impact delivery framework, talking about creating better, more and sustained impact. And sustained is the last and really important piece of that, which is that, you can create a tool and it can be super effective and super great, but how do we make sure that it's not just working for the 3 years that your project runs, but that it's really adopted for the long term? Because right now, within this industry, within, the development industry, and also within like using digital tools, we know that a lot of digital tools don't stand the test of time. So the first thing, of course, is that you need to be thinking about 10 years from now on day one or on day like -1. You need to be planning for sustainability from the beginning. And I would say like the two pieces that I find most apt to derail your project are going to be like ownership and financial sustainability, and then operational staff capacity and sustainability. So on the first one, I think it's a pretty common sort of plan to have maybe say a 3 to 5 year project. And by year 4 or 5, you're transitioning ownership over to the Ministry of Health or whatever local ministry. And I think, on the one hand, that's great. Thinking about transitioning over to governments is fantastic. Like governments will always be charged with making sure that, people are healthy and crops grow. And, like they have ministries whose task it is to meet a lot of these goals that we're hoping to meet with our digital programs. That being said, it's very hard to embed yourself in a ministry. They have a lot of work that they're doing. And so in order to like really truly embed yourself in the government and with the ministry, you need to work with them very closely, both on training, which I'll talk about in a minute, but also just like, if after year 5, the ministry is taking this over, what's that going to cost them? And they need to be building that into their budgets proactively. They need to know that in 3 years, we need X number of thousands or millions of dollars to continue this project. And you can do all the planning you want, but if you're not actually talking very concretely with the ministry about what it means to take over a project, then there's almost no chance that that is going to live beyond that, like, initial phase. So I think working with governments is great. And I think, not just working with them, but working with them from day one and checking in continuously to say like, all right, it's year 3. In 2 years, you will be taking over full funding of this. What do you have earmarked? Who are we talking to? Who's going to allocate that funding? Because those are huge issues. And I think our largest projects that we've done with governments, it's taken years and years worth and a lot of staff to really work and liaise with the governments. And within the governments, there's all governments are incredibly complex in how their funding works. And so it's really important to focus on that and have an eye to that. I've seen way too many projects where it's like, yeah, the government takes over in year 5 and it just like falls apart so quickly because they haven't had the conversations they needed to make that shift over. It's also like an important thing to know. Obviously, there's loads of stakeholders in every single project, especially when you're working with NGOs and like public-private partnerships and ministries and of course your clients. But at the end of the day, if your goal is for the ministry to take over, remember that whatever tool you create has to add a lot of value to them and they have to be on board with it. I've certainly been a part of a few projects where maybe like the initial funder of a 5-year project is the one that's really driving everything. And then at the end, the ministry is like, well, we gave you feedback and you didn't really build us what we wanted. And so then they're like way less incentivized to take it over. So that's a good thing to think about too, in terms of like balancing stakeholder requests. So I think that's the number one thing, is looking at that funding mechanism, who's going to own it, and like having those conversations from day one and being really aligned and consistently checking in to say, all right, it's year 2, it's year 3, it's year 4. Are we on track? If we're not on track, what do we have to do to get back on track? Then secondly, and I think I see this in terms of sustainability, not only in these like larger government sort of engagements, but also, there's certainly NGOs that run programming, and the long-term plan is for them to continue to run that programming, and it's staff capacity. Especially with something like CommCare, what I'll see oftentimes in medium-sized organizations is that you have 1 or 2 people that are really great at building and maintaining the app, and everyone else kind of shies away from it. They're like, oh no, like, Innocent is the one that runs our app, and no one else needs to know. And then Innocent leaves the organization, and whoop, now no one knows how to use CommCare. And that is really, really tough. I mean, a lot of times actually when we're doing onboardings, it's because an organization has an app that someone built and they don't really understand it, and they're coming to us to interpret it and train them on it. And so that's a really tough place for an organization to be. So there's a few ways that you can combat this. Number one is like, please make sure you have more than 1 or 2 people that know how to use CommCare on your team. And beyond that, don't make people the only source of institutional knowledge about CommCare and your system. Make them document things in videos, on paper, like electronically. So one of the things that we'll do, I know I did it every time that I was going on maternity leave for my staff to take over, is I wrote really rich application documentation where I wrote, this is the case structure, this is the architecture, this is every form, this is what every form does, this is who can see every form, this is the journey we expect the case to go through. And it's like a real pain to create that app documentation. I mean, it's really like a lot if you're making it robust, but it's so helpful in terms of, if you get anyone that knows CommCare, they can come in right away. They can see like, okay, I get this. I know what this is doing. Like, oh, great. Now I know I can't change that, or I could change this. And having that sort of like written or video documentation of the system is also so important, especially in times when like we all know the reality of the world. Like it very much might be the case that like someone leaves, they give you like 2 or 4 weeks notice, and like there's no way that you can replace them in that time and hire their replacement. So then that documentation that they leave you can be like what the next person picks up. But I will say, like, I think M&E people and tech people are really happy to work in CommCare, and other folks who can be scared of it sometimes. And so if you are in an organization where you feel like your M&E team is like gatekeeping the tool, you want to try to have that not be the case, because the more people that are familiar with the system, the more resilient your organization is going to be to staff turnover. And every organization has staff turnover. There's hardly anyone that works in one company for their whole life. So you never want to bet, even if it's like the most reliable person you think that's going to be at your company for forever, you have no idea what could happen. You need to like kind of future proof your system and your app against those sorts of staff turnovers.
Great. Thanks, Erin. All of this just reminds me of how Erin makes notes on her apps for future Erin. So she would have comments on all these builds saying things like, don't delete this, or don't make this version.
I'm pretty infamous for writing "do not release" in all caps on an app version that's not ready to go out yet.
Yeah, it's great. And it really ties into how the tool offers ways in which you can make the solution sustainable. So with that, let's switch over to something which I feel different teams may have different reactions to. But Rachel from MHP Salud has asked, what are your thoughts on the ideal frequency and approach for making or slash rolling out user-facing updates in a tool like CommCare? And I think all of us on partnerships, on customer success may feel very differently about this than, say, what our product team feels. So yeah, Erin, curious to hear your thoughts on this one.
Yeah. And Rachel, in full transparency, I've worked with Rachel a lot, and I know what their app release schedule is. So I'll talk about that a little bit too, because I actually think they are a little bit different than most organizations in how rigid they are with it, I think, to their credit. So of course, one of the things that we love talking about CommCare is it's so easy to make a change, right? So if there's a bug in the system, you can fix it in 5 minutes, release a new version, and everyone can be unblocked like same day. And that's fantastic. And that is like for bug releases, especially, it's fantastic that you can make changes that quickly. One thing, and I think early on in my CommCare career, I would, be like, oh, let's just like change that really quick. Let's change it. Let's release it. There's a few things you have to think about with every application release. First is like people actually have to update the app. And you'd be shocked at how many people don't update the app, even if you have it on like an auto update rule, like to update every day. Because remember that when you have that setting on your app that says, hey, update every day, what that means is that once every 24 hours, the server is going to ping your phone for an update. If your phone is not in an area of service, like you're not going to see that ping. So that's not a fail safe. So first is just that anytime that you have a new app version that you want people to use, you need to actually communicate with them, make sure that they know they need to update their apps, and then follow up with them. Especially if you've made substantive changes like to things like the data structure, you're now going to start seeing like bifurcated data if you've got some people on the old version and some on the new version. So one thing that I think that people constantly underestimate is how much of a communications battle it is to release new changes. And then similarly, if it's just like small wording on a question, okay, that's probably something that, users won't need training on. But a lot of times when we're making changes, even if they're changes much for the better, it confuses users. They're used to the application behaving in a certain way. And so when that changes, they need to know, one, that it did change, so they're not confused, and then two, why it changed, and three, what to do now. And so it's really helpful to either send release notes or do refresher trainings, especially if it's a big overhaul. And that is like no small feat either. And so I think knowing those two things, what I would encourage folks to do is do really limited releases and to kind of batch them. So I think, Rachel, if you're still here, you can correct me. I think you guys do 2 a year, right? It's like 2 or 1 a year. And so they're big releases. And they do like a really formal sort of process around it. I know projects that could never get away with that. So that's okay. But I still think there's a lot of virtue in doing like a monthly release or something, set a timeline to say like the first of every month, we will let there be a release. So then people know, if it's like today, it's September 27th. If I give you a piece of feedback, that's not making it in for the October 1 release, right? Like that's probably going to be a November thing. So one, it allows them some consistency in knowing, when their feedback might be incorporated. And two, it lets them know this is when you're going to need to release. And then you can plan a little bit of training, kind of like ad hoc or as they might need it. The one exception to that, of course, is true bugs. If you have a true bug in the system, you should get that out of your system as soon as possible. You still will need to communicate that out and like follow up with people. But that's something where I would say like break your release cycle. If you have, release cycles twice a year or you have release cycles every month, if there's a true bug, fix it as soon as you can, get it out there, do some like emergency comms to your team. But hopefully if you have less release cycles, you've got longer to test and you're never releasing bugs. So.
All right, great. Thanks, Erin. While we've got time for 1 or 2 more final questions, my colleague Sarah from the marketing team will be launching a poll to capture any follow-up questions you may have and also see if you would like a follow-up conversation with Dimagi. So Kira Lee Cunard from Stanford University asks, how do you build partnerships with other digital partners to maximize impact and the utility of platforms for CHWs? And then Stephen Phillips in the same theme asks, how can I deliver impact during community health implementation?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think, one of kind of the themes that I know John, our CEO, talks about a lot is like this idea of out collaborating instead of out competing. And so certainly at Dimagi, we have an open source tool and we're always happy to integrate with other tools that we think add value to ours. So I think that's a real mindset shift. And so I think that's first when you're thinking about like partnering with other organizations to maximize impact, especially other digital tools. The other thing that we talk about a lot, especially with our enterprise partners, is this idea that you have a tech stack. It's not that you have CommCare and CommCare does everything for you. CommCare is phenomenal at frontline service delivery, at data collection, at kind of storing your data and then getting it out. If you've ever used our report builder, you've probably realized, oh, that's not enough for me. And that's because we're not a data visualization tool. But there are some great data visualization tools and data analytics tools that we would encourage you to use, like Power BI and Tableau. And what we've done is we've tried to make it easier to integrate with those. So whether you're using our OData feeds to link up to Power BI or Tableau, or whether you're using like the data export tool or our APIs to take your data and throw it into a data warehouse or data lake and then connect that to your BI tool. So I think you want to think really comprehensively about your tech stack and think about it in that way. What tool am I using? What purpose does it serve? What value is it adding to me? And then like, when would I use it and how does that all fit together, right? So like CommCare is often that first level, that beneficiary level, client level, frontline service delivery, frontline data collection tool. And then from there, are you sending to a data warehouse, a data lake? Are you using an OData feed to integrate? And then where are you going? Are you going to Power BI next? Okay, great. And what value is Power BI giving you? Data analytics, data visualizations. Okay, fantastic. But just think really concretely about, what is the tool that you're using? Are you using too many tools to do the same thing? Can you be a little bit more efficient in it that way? And then, what value is that tool adding? So like, sometimes it is the case that it is, one subset of your users will want to use Excel to do some quick like data exports. And then you'll also want like your formal Power BI dashboards. But think about, am I being like duplicitous in the tools that I'm using, or are these actually serving different purposes? That's okay. And then of course, like always looking at tools that can add more value. I know that like in CommCare, you can call out to other applications. So like some people have used SimPrints, which uses it's a fingerprint scanner that can add a lot of value when you're like searching the case list in CommCare. We also have like breath counter apps and things like that. And so I think if you see a technology that looks interesting and you think it could add value to your tech stack, just put it within that paradigm, say, how does this fit with the things that I'm doing right now? Does it duplicate any of my efforts, or does it enhance any of my efforts? And I think that's the test that you would want to run that through. But in general, like there should be no platform ever that claims to do everything. If they do, I would question them. So just think about, like I said, what need is it fulfilling for you and how well does it fulfill that specific need? Also think about like, what does the platform tell you it does? If someone tried to tell me that they were going to use CommCare as a data visualization tool, I would say, let's talk about that a little bit more. And I would not, I would maybe tell them that I think there might be other tools out there that are better suited for that. And I hope that, I think that other digital platforms would do the same and be honest about like how they market themselves. But to the question about like delivering impact during community health implementations, I think it's a little bit like what we talked about earlier in terms of digitization of community engagement interventions for health promotion. But I think, certainly one of the things that we talk about a lot is using CommCare for what we call service delivery. So early on, when folks started using CommCare, they were using it as mobile job aids. They were looking at community health workers and they were saying, how can we take all the things you do in your day and give you a tool that's going to make your job easier? It's going to make it easier for you to organize your day, see who you need to follow up with, and also help you when you're in that visit, deliver the right messages to them. That's kind of what we call service delivery. Now, recently, like I would say in the last 5 to 10 years, like monitoring and evaluation teams have gotten wind of CommCare and other tools like this. And they've realized that these are really great tools to collect clean and reliable data. So they've started jumping on the bandwagon for that. That's great. We're happy to see M&E teams using CommCare as well. What we would really like to see, going back to that like better, more sustained impact, is could you collect data and also improve service delivery with your application? So doing both at the same time. And we think that it's pretty easy to do that. The service delivery sorts of features that we're talking about, like adding in counseling messages, filtering and sorting case lists so that users know who they need to follow up with when. Those sorts of things are actually not our most technically complex features. So they're relatively easy to add in. And I think that it makes a huge difference in how your frontline workers use the tool, and also can really move the needle in terms of how you're delivering services. Your clients will have a better experience, your users will have a better experience, and also hopefully you as the person kind of in charge of the project will be getting better, cleaner data as well. So it really, improves service delivery from the bottom all the way up to the top.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Erin, for sharing all of your expertise, and for each of the participants for sharing their questions as well. Thanks to folks for filling out the poll too. We should be sharing resources in a few days from now, and we'll keep you posted on any other updates. Really excited for the next TMA session. Good luck to all of you. Have a great day ahead. Take care.
Thanks, everyone.